special episode. I am with Amanda Whittington. She's a writer of the Invincibles, which we're going to be talking about in today's episode, as well as she has been involved in so many other Sport Plus plays in the UK. With her, we are welcoming Steve Bolton, women's football historian and grandson of famous Dick Her Ladies Lizzie Ashcroft. This episode has been developed in partnership with the Football and War Network, which is represented by a friend, Alexandrou, who is the chair and co-founder of Football and War Network. So that said, thanks Amanda, thanks Steve, and thanks Alex for being with us today in this episode that promises a lot in terms of women's football history. We will be debating so many interesting works that you have been doing. So we are very excited, and the audience probably are in the same have the same feelings for that. Thanks, Amanda, and thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Well, we would like to start talking about the Invincibles. The Invincibles has been interesting work, I think very timely in terms of women's football recognition, right? And Amanda, can you tell us what the Invincibles talk about? And maybe you can give us some insights about how you developed that, and also how long it took, right? Because I imagine it's an immense work.
It took a while. I'm a playwright working in British theatre. I've been writing plays for nearly 30 years now, and one of my main interests is female-centered stories and untold stories of women's history as well as present day. So I've written about various subjects and aspects of women's lives, and football is a sport that's close to my heart for many reasons, and also because I was a 10-year-old playing football in the early 80s and was told that I really had to stop and it really wasn't appropriate, and I did, and that was it. And my football career ended at 10, and I've always had this kind of sense of injustice really about that, and I think it's really fueled my work and my interest in all the subjects I've written about is this kind of the injustice that women have experienced over the years in various ways. So the rise of women's football has been very interesting to me on a personal and a professional level. The Invincibles is a play set in two eras. It's set in 1917, and it tells the story of Sterling ladies who were statistically the most successful side of World War I in Britain. And it's woven in with the 2023 Women's World Cup, and it was staged just after the World Cup happened. So we had this dual storyline of then and now, of the situation in 1917 where women were briefly released to be able to play football and experience that kind of freedom and exhilaration and joy, which is we explore in the play a very interesting contrast with what was actually why they were playing and what was happening in the context of the World War. So it tells that story, and it also looks at 2023 of a teenager who is a high-level footballer who's had an injury and is watching the World Cup, and how she kind of works through her journey via England's progress in the Women's World Cup. And it was a really exciting thing to write, because when it was commissioned by the theatre, we didn't quite realise it was commissioned pre-COVID, and it was meant to be done earlier than it was. And then the actual production kind of was programmed for September of last year. And of course, the World Cup was just before that. So I kind of managed to persuade them I'd write this World War I storyline, and then when we got into rehearsal, when the World Cup was on, I'd write the scenes as the World Cup was playing out. So we didn't know really that we'd watch the World Cup through the eyes of this 17-year-old character Maya. But we had no idea whether England were going to progress, whether they were going to get out the group stage, what was going to happen. So in the month we were rehearsing, it was just kind of wonderful that England kept on winning and got to the final. So, you know, it was a kind of, I know it wasn't that kind of magical ending, they didn't win, but it really helped the play. And it just celebrates those two generations, the Lionesses and what they're doing now, and what Sterling ladies, who were called the Invincibles at the time, were doing then, and actually how it's taken a century to get from that incredible boom of women's world football in World War One to where we are now. It doesn't tell the story of what happened in between, especially, but it's a very interesting kind of dual-edged look at a century of women's football.
Yes. Steve, you had a role in the Invincibles too, right? You participated in that. Can you share more about your experience at the Invincibles?
Yes, it was absolutely fantastic fun and a great honor. It was great working with Amanda. I learned a lot as well, because one thing Amanda is very modest. She's a very, very good historian and articles, which are very two-dimensional. As a playwright, she has to create a world, and so it's fascinating. And so I think what happened was Amanda had a previous play, Atalanta Forever, and with the Micron touring theatre of Huddersfield, and I went to see the play, and I loved it. It was absolutely fantastic. My granny's third game was against Huddersfield Atalanta, and I watched it in an amphitheatre, an outdoor amphitheatre, one evening near Peterborough, which was quite interesting. But I sort of got to know Amanda electronically, and follow each other on Twitter, and etc. And I started putting out at some point about another famous team, the Plymouth ladies, who were, I describe them as a spinal tap of women's football. You couldn't make up what actually happened to them. It's absolutely everything. Interesting career, and Amanda kept tweeting back and I thought, well, somebody's after another play here, you know. And then eventually Amanda contacted me sort of out of the blue and said she'd been commissioned for Essex Theatre, Havering. Was there a local team that I could recommend? And I sort of nearly dropped out of my chair. I thought, wow, you know, it's the Sterlings. It's got to be the Sterlings. And so eventually that's what happened. And Amanda sort of commissioned me to help, really, as a historian, and just provide whatever information might be useful. And it went further than that. I think through Amanda's brokerage, the theatre took me on to do an exhibition, because I probably have one of the world's best collections in private hands. So, and I was treated as part of the team. It was absolutely fantastic, and I loved it. And it was a good 12 months work. I think people often think, that playwrights like Amanda sit back for a week or two and sipping a glass of wine in the south of France, knock together a play. And that there is so much hard work, so much research. Is that about a correct praise, Amanda?
Yeah, don't get too much sitting about with glasses of wine, but absolutely, yes. The kind of seed of the play came from, as Steve was saying, a play called Atalanta Forever, which was about a team I discovered in West Yorkshire, near where I live, and there's very little documented history about them. And I was working with a company, Micron Theatre, who again do stories about social history. So I thought, oh, that'd be great, that'd be really interesting. And the fact that there wasn't a great deal of documented evidence about them allowed me to kind of invent and create this story of the team. Then it was picked up, the play was picked up on my work. I had a relationship with Queen's Theatre in Hornchurch, which is Essex, just outside London. And they liked the idea of the Atalanta play, but they said, can you could we relocate it to Essex? So that's why I kind of, as Steve said, I contacted him and said, you know, do you know of a team that would be interesting? And Stirling Ladies, the Dagenham Invincibles, were a very different proposition to Huddersfield Atalanta because they were so successful, and they were in the Daily Mirror, and they were on Pathé News, and they were really well publicized and quite famous at the time in 1917. So really it was a brand new play, and with Steve's invaluable research and incredible support, I got a tremendous amount of material this time to write from. So rather than kind of imagining who this team was, there was a wonderful body of research there to write from and give it that authenticity. And it was a lot of work, but it was an absolute dream job, really, in that sense. Yeah. You know, it was wonderful. And to bring those, you know, these forgotten women who achieved so much, and to be able to bring them back to life on stage and create their reality and their relationships and their success was a total privilege. It was a real joy to do.
I can imagine. I'll over to Alex now, because Alex has been in the audience, right, of the Invincibles. So Alex, what was your interpretation of the play? Can you share with the audience?
Well, I loved it, and I tweeted about it for a number of days after I watched it. I watched it at another theatre because it did a little tour of two theatres, the one in Essex and then the one in Ipswich, which is not too far from where I live. And Steve's exhibition was there as well. And the one thing that strikes you as an audience member is as soon as you walked into the theatre, you're being educated through, firstly, Steve's exhibition. And it's little things like the original football boots that women wore and how small they wore, and also the studs they used, which could now be regarded as a dangerous weapon. So you then begin to get an idea of how the game was played with the type of kit that was played, even down to having one of the shirts from the Invincibles on show that the Dagenham Stirling ladies actually wore. So any audience member will get a real feel. And I was an interested onlooker in relation to Steve's exhibition, because there'd be families and there'd be mothers and daughters coming along, and you know, it showed a different era of women's football. And I think that was an important education element to it. And then to the play itself, it was the jumping backwards and forwards, the juxtaposition between the two different eras, because they're both important historically for me. The football played around the First World War was part of a short-lived emancipation for women, because we also had in the UK at the time the suffragettes movement that was looking for political emancipation as well. But what you get a really good feel for is the change in circumstances of women in terms of working in factories, whether they were munitions factories or the type of work that the Stirling ladies were doing, which was not munitions as such all the time. So you get a sense of the type of work they were doing and how different it was for them, and how their lives had changed, not only because some of their loved ones, their family members, were off fighting at the front line, but also that their working lives had significantly shifted. But you also see that there are still the same attitudes towards women at the time from their male family members or others that they work with. And then you jump to 2023 and the Lionesses, and you're seeing, as Amanda said, how football is being played out through the eyes of a young woman who wants to be a footballer. And hopefully I'm not stealing Amanda's thunder too much, but she's going through a crisis herself because of an injury that a lot of female footballers are currently experiencing. So you then get a good understanding of the issues that women footballers were facing both off the field and on the field during the First World War period, and also what women footballers are experiencing on and off the field in the current day. And getting that mix, being able to jump from one scene to the next, it was I'm not trying to embarrass Amanda, but it was fantastic because it actually joined up really well, because there were themes that were recurring in both scenarios. And for an audience member, that was exciting to watch.
And that's very, very interesting to me. And I would ask Amanda, there is an intentionality behind just opposing past and present, precisely to showcase how much how much women's football has developed, right? And women's rights as well has developed since 1917 up to 2023. So can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of showcasing past and present at the same time?
Yeah, I think it was about saying everything's changed, but so much has stayed the same, and not literally the same. Obviously, we're in a completely different world, but I think there's a sense now that because we have professional female teams, because we have the national team in England, the Lionesses doing so well and just kind of on the world stage, that the battle is won and it's all fine and it's all okay, and freedom and emancipation and equality is here now, because look at this, look at the Lionesses, and it is amazing what they've done. But that does not mean that there are still there are no inequalities and there are no battles to fight, whether it's a ridiculous disparity in pay between the men's game and the women's game, whether it's the ACL injuries, that kind of epidemic of ACL injuries, which are down to boots that are made for boys and men to play in, and all of that. So there's the kit, and so I think putting the two eras together was sort of telling us now, don't be, celebrate everything that's happened, but don't be fooled that it's all fine, because there's and this is true in society in general. There's still, many, many battles to fight and win. And Maya, our 17-year-old, was kind of working her way through that, I think. And we also had the character of her mother, who'd been like me and sort of been playing in the early 80s and loving football, and then just stopped and there was nowhere to go. And she brought all of that sense of, when you watch the Lionesses now here, or you watch women's football now, there's still that kind of sense of, for women of my generation, of how that was, that was taken away from us in a way. So it's complicated, and it was looking at sort of unpicking that complicated picture. And also for young women and boys and girls, and coming to see the play, just telling the stories of those World War I players that is still fairly little known. I think we as a playwright, as researchers, as historians, we're just coming to discover all this. But I've got 4 teenage nephews, and they came along to see it, and it was complete revelation to them. When women were playing 100 years ago, and getting the so much out of the game. And then, of course, there was the 1921 FA ban, where it was literally banned, and playing on FA grounds, and all of that stopped. So I think it's really important, you have to know your history to know who you are. And I think telling these stories, they're exciting, accessible, pieces, it became an exciting, accessible piece of theatre, I hope. But there's also a social value in those young people coming to see the play and thinking, oh my goodness, I never knew this. And I see the Lionesses playing now, and I had no idea that what came not that long ago before them, what happened. So it's I think the contrast of the two together allowed that sort of tension and dynamic to be explored sort of live in front of our eyes and on stage. And also the difference between a play and a sort of factual piece of history, a documentary, is that you can bring it to life, and you're not only exploring the facts and figures, you're exploring how people thought and how they felt. And that is a very powerful communicator, I think, in terms of it getting the history across, because you have an audience that will empathize with those characters.
Yeah.
And that was my aim, really, is to create sort of empathy and understanding, as well as knowledge and, you know, the sort of factual side of it. I just wanted people to feel it.
Yeah, no, I would love to to be in the audience as well as Alex went, and Steve for sure. Did you have any prominent football figure from the FA, for instance, or from football clubs attending your play?
I don't think so. I don't think we did. No, sadly. It was funny because it was just on the back of the World Cup, as I say, and I think we were quite keen to try and get some figures from the football world in, but it was probably just timing wise, because I think a lot of people were out of the country at that time as well, or so. But we got some. On the flip side of it, so I was in touch with a kind of grassroots football club in Hornchurch where the play was on, who had 13 girl teams, you know, which to me was just remarkable, because when I was growing up, there wasn't 13 in the country. So that was really magic. And they brought a big party along, and, you know, they brought their girls to see it. And that was magic, really. So it was nice to get them in, even if we didn't get the higher echelons of the football world in.
Yeah.
But that's quite telling, Felipe, that you know that there weren't those individuals there, and there is Amanda's play does bring to light the continuing disparity. For example, even within the higher echelons of women's football in England, we have the Women's Super League. Now, most of those teams do not play at the home stadium where the men play. You know, Arsenal do play at their stadium, and Chelsea do play at their stadium every now and again. Leicester City do. But I went to a match last Sunday, Tottenham Hotspur versus Leicester City, and that was played at Leyton Orient's ground, which is on the other side of London, to basically where Tottenham play. And what you see there is that there are only 1,500 fans there, and that's for one of the two top class, you know, women's teams. And so you're thinking, right, so where's the investment here? It's all, but the atmosphere was excellent, great engagement between the players and the fans before, during, and after the match. Great atmosphere, family friendly, lots of young people there, but it brings to light the attitudes that prevailed in World War I women's football, still occur now to some degree and in different ways, even now. And I think that's a key point for me, that sort of resonates throughout the play.
Yeah, I don't know if Steve can share, as a women's football historian, a little bit about the Sterling Ladies, which is a very important part of the play, and what Alex mentioned about the prohibitions, whether or not the Sterling Ladies have faced the prohibitions, how did they cope with that, and maybe what was the main message to or the main information to give to Amanda, well, the Sterling ladies, that was important for the play that you shared, Steve?
Yes. Well, I was more than delighted when Amanda contacted me to work with me, to work with her and take me on as historian. But I was actually very, very pleased for the Sterling ladies, because as has just been said about the women's football and women playing football have been treated so badly, women's history of football is treated very badly as well. And the Sterling ladies have been the victims of that. I feel very strongly about the injustice of this. So there's been sort of bits of documentaries and stuff. There was one for the BBC Commission, I think, for about the Blythe Spartans, the famous Northeast team of World War One, and they show some of the old Pathé clips. Well, because the Sterling ladies were the poster girls, whilst they're showing this history of the Blythe Spartans, you're seeing Pathé clips of the Sterling ladies. When you see stories about World War One football teams, they'll be talking about a football team in another part of the country. They'll show you a picture of the Sterling ladies. And if you were to do that in male football, I'm going to do a history of Liverpool, but I'm going to show you pictures of Chelsea, or I'm going to do a story of Manchester United and I'll show you film clips of Liverpool, you'd be laughed out of court. But this is taken for granted. And the poor old Sterling ladies, the early sort of famous team in World War One was the Portsmouth ladies, but they were a little bit geographically challenged. It was the Sterling ladies who then became the poster girls, and they appeared in Pathé. They were in the National Daily Mirror more than any other team in the second half of the war, and they were also in the New York Herald. They were, you know, they really were the team that were promoted women's football in World War One, and they've almost been completely airbrushed out of history. I've done a few of my blog articles, but until Amanda's play came along, they didn't get their rightful place in history. And I think one thing that really did significantly come out of this play, I think, and it's thanks to Alex and it's thanks to Amanda and our friends at the Western Front Association, is that a wreath was laid at the cenotaph on Remembrance Day on behalf of the women footballers of World War One with a picture of the Sterling ladies. And that directly came from this play, because the organizer Colin from the big charity Western Front Association came to see our play. I wanted somebody there, and it turned out I had the great honour of being the person on the spot who was available that day. So, you know, finally, inch by inch, they are getting their recognition for one of the greatest women's football teams of history. You know, that really children should be in school, I think. And the play went along with that. So I was very, very grateful for Amanda for doing that. The other thing as well, which you know, I'm not going to shy away from this. Amanda, born on genius here, was able to historically represent what they actually did, what they actually achieved, because they kicked off the second season at West Ham at Upton Park. That was a great honour. Amanda was able to weave that into this fascinating story with this external character that she brought in now. So she was able to make this amazing play full of tension, but be pretty historically true. And I think that was a tremendous achievement. And it took 12 months of hard work to get there. But I think, as Alex has said, it truly was worth it, because although they were the Invincibles, they were one of probably over 250 teams who played, if we go to the end of the 1918-1919 season, over 1,000 games, raising what was an absolute fortune for, in the early part of the war, wounded soldiers, disabled soldiers, food parcels, you name it. And then in the 1918-19 bit, it was for war memorials, for wounded, for hospitals, and so on and so forth. So they really were key contributors to the Allied effort. And you know, it's in my wildest dreams a few years ago, I wouldn't have thought that, you know, there'd be a play about them. and that a wreath will be laid at the cenotaph on Remembrance Day.
I have a curiosity, Amanda, because I obviously was not in the play, but have you discussed with your characters the reasons of the ban that FA
Well,
imposed in 1921, if I'm correct?
yeah. Well, what's interesting about Sterling Ladies is they just played for 2 seasons over from 1917, 1918, and they didn't make it as far as the ban. So the first play I wrote about, Atalanta Forever, they were playing in 1921, so I explored that. But in this play, I didn't, because the facts were that basically when the war ended and the troops came home and life went back to some kind of normal, the women left the factories. There was a social kind of pressure to go back home, become wives and mothers, and help rebuild the nation. So Sterling didn't really play beyond the end of the war. So what we had in the play was the end of the war, the armistice announcement. This is it. It's all, and it was very interesting. And Steve and I talked about this, in that the ban happened in 21, but it would have happened. And women's football dissolved away because of the social pressures of the time. And the FA ban, which is the thing down that sort of feels like that blunt instrument of everyone was having a brilliant time playing and then bang, wham, it was all over. It wasn't really like that, because the Sterling ladies who worked in the factory kind of, and what we explored in the play is that, well, what are we going to do now? We go home. We're losing our jobs. And they kind of hung up their own boots, as it were, because they knew that golden time of freedom was over. And the barriers were now going to be put back in place because the war was finished and their job was to make way for the guys coming home. And in a way, that's more interesting and nuanced and more universal than the FA ban at the end of the day, because that's what happened. And that's what the play's about, really. In both time areas, it's about freedom and repression, I guess, and what is freedom, and freedom in sport, but at what cost does that come at? So, we managed to get around the fact that factually we didn't have the ban happening within their lifetime, but we had a more sort of interesting social conditioning and self-censorship, in a way, of the characters kind of going, well, we can't carry on, there's no one to play, that factory stopped team, that factory's on, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. And that rage they had of realizing they'd come to the end of the road, and they had to stop thinking about this, and they had to stop being these women, and they had to start being what society wanted them to be, which is more powerful and more painful and more truthful in a way than that kind of allowed us to explore that in the way that had, I think, the first play that was the ban, it was a little bit black and white, the FA's banned us and that's not fair and la la la. And it was, it was an awful thing what happened to the FA, but the fact that there were bigger wheels in motion, I think, brought about the end of women's football. So that's what play really, that's where we kind of took those characters to that point of, we have to stop now, don't we? It's the end of the road.
So but like, I mean, when the audience understands what women's have been through in the first 2 decades of the first century, I don't know if you have been able to talk with the new generation of women attending your play, and what were their reactions? Imagine that after the play, they have more like a sense of responsibility to keep on the legacy this?
I think so. And I think hopefully there's a recognition of the freedoms they have come, they've been hard won, and there's been a lot of obstacles along the way. And the obstacles of the society, and I think girls today and boys today recognize the sexism and the discrimination in society in all its forms. And I think it's very interesting to show what was happening then, and for young people to kind of find those modern day parallels, really. And just from my point of view, I suppose I just think it's good to know your history, and it's good to know how these freedoms have been won and how fragile they are as well.
Yeah.
And that goes across the board, obviously, not just in football or sport, it's in all aspects of life, and I think, with the sort of women's movement and the civil rights movement and the feminism of the 60s, I think there has been a bit of a, perhaps we thought all that was sorted when it's not. There's still battles to fight, and there's still, those freedoms are quite fragile in certain countries as well, not just in the UK. So yeah, I think it's just raising an awareness of that, really. But also, Steve there was a wonderful kind of feedback form for the exhibition, and there was lots of comments, wasn't there, Steve? Like, I think it's unfair, it's awful, it should, and just that really basic awareness of the young people being quite angry about it, how their counterparts were treated 100 years ago.
I think that's an important point that Amanda makes, in terms of the education of the younger generations, and about knowing their history. I posted afterwards that I felt that this play should do a tour of schools around the UK. It would fit perfectly, and the reason I said that was not only watching the reactions of my fellow audience members, and there were gasps at times, and there was this bit of interaction with the audience, which I thought was excellent. But many years back, I worked with the Kick Racism Out of Football campaign, and they had links with a theatre company which took a play around the country, dealing with aspects of racism. So it can work. And I feel that there are so many strong messages, historically and current, within the play, that it would be a shame if the play wasn't put on again, but particularly aimed at the younger generations around schools and community groups, because I think they would get so much out of this play.
And again, thank you very much. And again, it's about that sense of empathy, of them being able to relate to and empathize with the characters, relate to their they're playing for the love of the game, which is one of the themes of play. And I think in terms of education, it's educated me as well, because I can, as I say, that being that 10-year-old and being the only girl playing in the village in the boys' team, and then little local tournament, and then being made to feel that it was not the thing to do. And I thought at that time that nobody else would no other girls wanted to play football. I had no reference points whatsoever. So you kind of internalize that, and you feel like you're the only one in the world. So for, even people of my age, my generation, coming to see the play and going, oh my God, they were playing 100 years ago and they felt like I did. That changed how I feel about myself, learning about all of this as well. So I think there's a lot of us have that child within us who still feels that they were somehow wrong for wanting to do that, and now being proved that they really weren't. And it's that's why we had the mother character as well, and to sort of explore that. But I think it's an entertaining play, but you do hope there's some messages kind of locked into there that connect.
So Steve, how important is this type of plays in your opinion, to keep preserving women's football history? which is as you are an expert on that, a topic that has only recently been investigated, right? So what is the importance to bring awareness to women's football history, those type of plays that Amanda has been written?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. I think, as I hinted earlier, it brings a dimensionality to the story, a human aspect to the story, and it's thought provoking in the way even I don't think the cleverest writing can do. You know, I won't give too much away, but there's a point where people were coming out in tears for the emotion of what was happening. And just going back to the feedback point earlier, I designed these little feedback cards based upon a 1970 postcard of it's a cheeky cartoon of a girl bending over with her knickers showing, and it's a girl's all not to play football. And that feedback thing. And what was really interesting, we had some amazing feedback. Like there was a woman and a daughter that come from Bath, which is sort of half a day's travel away. The daughter brought the mother as a present, and they were doing this bonding session. And I met them before and afterwards. It was absolutely lovely. They went and chased the cast afterwards, actually, found them in a diner and talked to them. But the feedback was amazing. People loved the play. We expected that because we all see that the play. But what was really interesting was when a bunch of younger girls were brought around and they filled in the feedback card, and they didn't see the irony of the cartoon on the front. Girls will not play football. They were just absolutely outraged. And they didn't spare that on their feedback. The sheer thought for them that girls couldn't play football was an outrage, and to provoke that sort of emotion and that sort of knowledge at that age is I think is a key way of educating that as Alex has said, this play can do. It reaches the parts other things don't reach, and the other thing as well is I did not realise, because Amanda told me we've been working on this for several months. I never realised just how personal this was for Amanda, because she's very, very professional. And so we were lots of ideas and early story art Amanda was saying for the play, and I was going, I researched this and the Mahotonga Club where the Maori soldiers were in Hornchurch, and that could have been a story arc, and so on and so forth, backwards and forwards. And it wasn't until quite late on that I realised Amanda was going on this amazing sort of personal journey in sort of what she was pouring into her writing.
Amanda, any comments on that?
No, it's true, and I think it made me feel like I could talk about my experiences, and it kind of validated my experiences, and I did go on a kind of personal journey with it, and felt that I could channel a lot of this stuff that I didn't even really know I was carrying around, and suddenly kind of thought, oh God, I'm finding a way to tell my story as well, and this is really quite liberating. So yeah, that's exactly what happened, and I'm very glad, I got the opportunity to do that, and I'm very glad in my lifetime I've seen such an arc of change in women's football. It's still kind of extraordinary to me to sit down and watch the Lionesses, and the 10-year-old me would have been gobsmacked, absolutely wouldn't have believed it. So there was some of that, there was a lot of that joy and celebration went into the play, as well as the kind of gritty stuff. But yeah, no, absolutely, it was a personal journey, and it was a very cathartic one.
Well, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
Sorry, but I think you pick up on a key point here, Amanda. The joy and celebration. I mean, I go to women's football matches, and you see that with the young kids, boys and girls, how much they actually love being at the games, and they love interacting with the players, and the players go above and beyond. They are role models for their male counterparts, let alone, but they are role models.
That's right.
the young girls look up to these players. And I think that, and we've seen a surge in young girls taking up football. And it's not just the Lionesses, it's also the other teams. You know, we have 6 key tiers of women's football, from the WSL to regional football, where the players don't get paid. Sometimes they actually have to pay subscriptions to play. But, you know, there is always this constant interaction between the younger girls and the younger fans and the players. And I think that is important. And that's why this play can actually enhance all of that as well, because it's telling several stories, but from 2 different generations of players. And I really do, you know, you do pick up on that, Amanda, and I think that is key.
That's great, thank you. And you just made me think about the role models and the sense of responsibility I think the female players have to show those girls that there is, you know, there is hope for them to succeed and achieve in the game. But also talking about my 4 nephews who came to see the play. And my brother was saying that they've got the Football Manager PlayStation, and he said, but they put female players into their teams. They pick the best players, and all the kids, the boys have got like these mixed teams now, and it's not a thing. It's not an issue.
Wow.
It's just, and I just thought that was just brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
That the England team are achieving that as well.
Since we're like talking about the positive moments of women's football development, right? Do you see yourself writing another play of women's football, maybe in 15 years from now, and how that would look like for you?
That'd be interesting. I'd never say never. Yeah, because I thought I just was doing the Atalanta, a fairly small scale thing, and now we've written the Invincibles and opening this, you know, this whole sort of new world, really. And I think, who knows? There may well be a play to write in the future that sort of takes us to the next step. I would always be open to it. And I think there's, I mean, I've written a sequel of, well, a trilogy of 3 plays in another part of my work that goes over sort of 20+ years. So yeah, I might have the Invincibles too. Who knows?
And what would you like to see in this potential second play, that you couldn't put in the first play?
I suppose the me in the real world, rather than the dramatic theatrical world, you'd want to see in 15, 20 years' time greater equality, higher status for the game. But of course, to make a drama, you need tension and you need conflict. And you need, you know, things to not be going the character's way. So let me think. I would say that, I suppose, you know, let's hope women's football doesn't become too complacent or too much like the men's game. Because what you were saying in terms of, you know, the atmosphere at the matches, it's so different to the men's game, isn't it? The whole kind of culture and the atmosphere and the sense of joy and celebration around it. And let's hope we never lose that. And, or, you know, there may be a play to write in the future where we feel somehow we've drifted away from this, what is quite a special time. And the equality and the development, we've got to make sure we don't, progress doesn't make us lose what's really special and important about it. So maybe there'd be something in that.
Yeah, it's a great way to answer. I have also interviewed other women, and they normally emphasize that it's a unique sport, and should never be trying to compare themselves with men's. Literally develop women's football as a only sport, one sport, and with all the positive features that they can display. So it is. I think your answer just echoes that, and it is good because it has been repeated so many times, and And I think that that's the direction too. I know, Amanda, you have just we have 2 minutes with
Yeah.
us. Would like to know if especially for me, because I don't think I will be in England soon, or when I will be in England, maybe there's no Invincibles running. Is there any plans to transform the play into like Netflix series?
Well, you know, if Netflix is watching,
Okay.
I'm open to offers. This is the play. It's
Perfect.
published.
Uh-huh.
It's published by a company called Nick Hearn Books. I would say you can get it on Amazon,
Okay.
also on my website or through my website. But yeah, I think there is. I can see it on film. I can see it as on the big screen. I could see it as a series. So I'm always looking for new opportunities for my work, and you know, you hope that once something is written, that it will have a future life in some way. So yeah, watch this space.
I will be staying tuned to see the updates.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amanda, for being with us. It was a real pleasure, and I hope to see you again.
Yes, definitely. Lovely to talk to you. Good to see you all, and see you again sometime.
Yes.
Cheers.
Have a great Friday.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.